This is the Drive and Dish Podcast.
Oh, me, oh, my! A monster jam!
Talking about NBA news, stats, and fantasy.
Oh,
To start it off, it's Tim Tompkins and Kevin Rayfuse.
oh, he just sucked the gravity right out of the building!
Let's go.
First floor. Basketball is my favorite sport. I like the way they dribble up and down the court, just like I'm the king on the microphone. So it's Dr. J and Moses Malone. I like slam dunks and taking it to the hoop. My favorite play is the alley oop. I like the pick and roll.
I mean, it was only really a matter of time before we used this as an intro.
We couldn't resist, more basketball. Love basketball. That's what this podcast is about.
Is there
it's his favorite sport.
Is there a better NBA song or basketball song? I guess I should say not NBA, but basketball song in general than Curtis Blow's version right here?
Oh man, I don't know.
Space Jam?
Oh, we might have to do Space Jam.
That Space Jam theme, yeah, that's the only one I can think of. Space Jam theme definitely needs to happen. All right, so next week, Space Jam theme.
Well,
Justin, lock it in. It's gonna happen.
Oh, Dan, I'm writing it down right now. Speaking of Space Jam, just a little side thing. Isn't LeBron supposed to be in the next Space Jam?
I think they discredited that rumor.
I think we finally stopped it. Which
that was the only way they can compare him to Michael Jordan. He
Yeah.
has to do a movie.
That and the dunk contest.
Yes, exactly.
Well, we know the dunk contest isn't happening, but no, it is happening right now. The Drive and Dish NBA podcast. My name is Kevin Rayfuse. Welcome all our listeners. Joining me to my left, Tim Tompkins, my fellow co-host, and behind the boards, keeping us honest, Justin Kuzart. What's going on, gentlemen?
Not much. How about you?
Good. Everything is good. I like that we're recording this on Saturday now for our
Yes.
listeners out here. We used to do this on Sunday mornings. We're now switching to Saturday afternoons.
Less
Think we'll have a
hungover.
little more energy, be a little more into it. I don't know what's going on. How's everybody's week?
It's good, man. It's March Madness. It's the 1 month of the year where everybody pretends to be into college basketball.
Tim, you are such a college basketball hater.
No, I'm not. Listen, I don't like college basketball, but I cannot stand that all of a sudden everybody's an expert on their brackets. They're like, oh, I have Louisville going number one. Why do you have Louisville going number one? Have you looked at their defensive schemes? Have you looked at like the matchups between the front court and the back court, and you've decided who has a favorable matchup? No, you just make this stuff up and then claim a heightened sense of intelligence.
Well, you know, it took the first game of March Madness for 80% of people to no longer have a perfect bracket.
I was busted for me.
Yeah, it was the same
Ohio
thing.
State, they killed me.
And
then everybody was tweeting all over social media. Everybody thought they were so creative when it's like, oh, looks like I'm not going to win $1 billion. It's
Yeah.
like, come on. Every
No doubt.
single person tweeted that.
Well,
but
and-
I was one of those, like, first out, first game, $1
Yep.
billion down the toilet. I saw on Twitter,
No more.
there's not a single perfect bracket left. So Warren Buffett will get his $1 billion. People didn't even survive the first round. There's not a single perfect bracket left in the entire country.
Yeah, I think Duke losing really sealed the deal there.
Yeah,
'cause
I don't know anyone that picked Mercer.
No.
Or at least without flipping a coin or just really passionately.
and got
hating
everything
Duke for
else
no
right,
reason.
but then got that one right.
Speaking of that, did you see there's a bunch of people putting up on Twitter of different ways that they were picking who would win in the brackets? I know I saw one, the person was writing it on two tennis balls and throwing it, whichever one their dog brought back. That was the team he would write in.
Didn't our good friend Mark Kay do it by putting eggs in a
Yeah.
microwave and seeing which one exploded
He
first?
broke 4 shot glasses doing that.
There's never, ever a dull moment, but that is probably the most creative way I've heard to say it. And Tim, know what I'm hearing? Your college basketball hatred. Know what I'm hearing right now? What grinds my gears next week?
No?
No?
Maybe?
Yeah, there's a good chance I was actually thinking about going off on people that all of a sudden are college basketball experts come March Madness. They're just so passionate about a team that they haven't watched all year long.
But everybody can get into the bracket. It's like an every man's game.
Hey,
'Cause even if
speaking-
you pick straight the numbers, you still have a good chance to win.
I guess so. We're actually going to be talking a little bit of brackets coming up, thanks to a listener who hashtagged DADpod and sent us a topic idea. And because of that, we're going to talk about it once we get into the news and notes section of the show.
Absolutely. Send us your ideas on Twitter. Hashtag, like Tim said, DADpod. You can also find us on iTunes right now. Just search the Drive and Dish podcast. Hit that subscribe button. We'd really appreciate it. You can hear us talk basketball every week. We'll get a little preview going on right now for what we got today. We got the Clippers coming up. Are they for real? Are they not? Making a serious run at the number 1 seed in the Western Conference. We've got Phil Jackson officially on board as the Knicks president. Can he turn around that franchise and really get things going? We got the Miami Heat giving a little bit more time to Greg Oden, kind of experimenting with some bigger lineups going against what has essentially won them back-to-back championships so far. We're also going to talk about the Pacers' recent struggles and and kind of a debate on shortening up the NBA season with all kind of the injuries that have been going on this year. A lot of key injuries around the league. But why don't we go to some news right now? Justin, you got the news?
Yeah.
All right, let's do this.
Puts it up for the win! Yeah, baby!
Now on to NBA news on the Drive and Dish podcast. Shooting guard Shannon Brown signs with the New York Knicks for the remainder of the season after finishing his 10-day contract. However, the Knicks did not sign Earl Clark after the expiration of his 10-day contract. Nets forward Kevin Garnett has not played since February 27th due to back spasms, but expressed that he expects to return soon, saying, and I quote, "These last 5 days I'm feeling better. I'm looking forward to getting back out there." The Celtics signed Chris Babb for the remainder of the season. Babb is a 6'5" swingman whose second 10-day contract expired Thursday, averaging 2 points in 6 games. Bucks center and block specialist Larry Sanders confirms that he'll miss the remainder of the season due to eye surgery. By most standards, he had a disappointing season. He averaged 8 points and 7 rebounds. Lakers point guard Jordan Farmer will miss 2 weeks due to a mild groin strain. Farmer's already missed the majority of the season due to injuries. This leaves the Lakers with only one healthy point guard in Kendall Marshall to man the sinking ship. Kyrie Irving will miss at least 2 weeks after he suffered a left bicep injury during the Cavaliers' loss to the Clippers. Kyrie stated that he hopes to return this season, but with the Cavs out of the playoff hunt, many believe he will look to be sidelined for the remainder of the season.
Hey, Justin, thanks for reading that news, man. So, yeah, Kyrie Irving, he's out for what looks to be the rest of the season, huh?
Yeah, he said he wants to come back, but they don't really have playoff hope. So there's no point to. Really.
Yeah, I don't get why. If I'm Kyrie Irving, I'm rushing back. You know, if you're the Cavaliers, he's the future of your franchise, and what's been pretty disastrous of a season and kind of a disaster over the last few years. So I don't know why you'd rush this guy back. I know their goal was to really, get in, kind of be that 8 or 7 seed this year. They were really pushing hard for the playoffs, but do you really want to mortgage your future to be an 8 seed and get swept in the first round by the Pacers or the Heat?
No, there's no reason to risk further injury. Speaking of playoffs, though, how about them Clippers?
Playing really well.
At the right time of year, too. Mm-hmm. Chris Paul's healthy, back in the lineup. Blake Griffin, we talked about it a little bit last week in the potential MVP discussion. He actually, this week, went on record, says, do not put me in the NBA discussion, or MVP discussion, I should say. I don't deserve it. I thought that was kind of interesting.
Did he? Why did he say that?
I think he was more of giving props to LeBron and Durant, just saying there are better seasons, kind of a humble thing, or maybe he's trying to keep the spotlight off him so that the Clippers can kind of continue flying under the radar. With all the star power you have, it does kind of seem like the Clippers are flying under the radar a little bit. Do you get that vibe, or is that just me?
No, a little bit. I think that a lot of that has to do with the fact that they had such a similar season last year. I don't know, what they win, like 54 games?
And it's like pretty much the same record
they ended up being bounced out in the first round. If you look at it this year, though, their offensive and their defensive ratings have both improved by a couple of points. And I'm wondering, how much of an effect do you think Doc Rivers has had on that squad?
The big thing that Doc brings is the emphasis on defense. The problem with the Clippers last year is they could score points with anybody and have the whole Lob City deal going on, but they really couldn't play any defense against Vinny Del Negro. With Doc Rivers, you have that championship pedigree. We saw his teams in Boston were geared around defense, with KG, obviously the anchor. And, I think we're kind of seeing that on the Clippers a little bit. I'm not saying that they're as good defensively as those Celtics teams are, but.
Well, I don't know about that. Since the All-Star break, they're actually the second best team in the league with a defensive rating.
Well, I think a lot of that has to do with Jordan, because I think I was reading a bunch of articles saying that Doc Rivers really got on Jordan to step his game up pretty much. They were saying he gave him goals and said, this is what you need to do, and if you don't do that, you're going to have to figure something else out.
But not just the goals, he's also giving him the playing time and the confidence to do that. Right now, Jordan leads the league both in rebounding and effective field goal percentage, and that has to be a direct result because of Doc Rivers' coaching style on him.
And he's got career highs in points blocked. I think that has, goes hand in hand with Doc Rivers coming in and just kind of slapping him in the face and saying, look, this is what needs to happen.
Yeah, I agree. And we mentioned it a little bit, but I can't think you can take away enough from Blake Griffin really becoming a complete player this year. For better or for worse, he's always had that label of kind of just the dunker and the flashy dunker, but he couldn't really do anything. His mid-range has been just surprisingly, it's just gotten so much better this year. But he's such a bigger threat shooting the ball. You have to respect his jump shot this year.
Now he can do a pick and pop as well as a pick and roll.
Right. And it's just been, when Chris Paul went down, a lot of people thought they were going to plummet down the standings and they didn't know if they'd be able to recover. I don't think anybody really thought they were in danger of missing the playoffs. A lot of people thought with just Blake and, DeAndre Jordan and obviously the whole team they have right now, a lot of people really thought they'd kind of slip down into that 6, 7, 8 range where, they're third in the West right now. They're 48-21. In their last 10 games, they're 9-1. The only reason they're really not kind of making a run at all of it is San Antonio. In their 12-game win streak, they're finally healthy for the first time. That's a scary sight for the whole rest of the Western Conference.
I think if I'm the Clippers, I don't want anyone to really notice how good they are. I want it to stay under the radar, and then suddenly in the playoffs, it's like, oh my gosh, they're destroying teams, and then it's like maybe they can ride that momentum.
But you got to think everybody's taking notice right now. Maybe the casual basketball fan isn't, but the coaching staffs that are looking at the seeding in the playoffs, they have to know if they're playing the Clippers, and they have to be paying attention to that.
Yeah,
obviously, standings going to change over the past few weeks, especially in the West, with kind of the logjam of competitiveness that is the Western Conference right now. If the season were to end today, Clippers would play Golden State first round. How fun of a matchup would that be?
All about it.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Can you imagine the offensive showcase that would go on in that game? I know we've been talking about defense, but, oh, man, Lob City versus the Splash Brothers, that has an NBA fan just salivating thinking about that matchup.
That is, I'd rather see the Warriors play the Thunder personally, because those games this season have just been so good, and they've all come down to the wire with some crazy 3-point shooting right at the end of the games. But that would be a fun matchup, absolutely. Let's say that the Clippers do make it to the conference finals. That they don't make it past the conference finals. They get beat by the Spurs or Thunder or something. Is Doc Rivers a candidate for Coach of the Year?
I'm going to say no. Jeff Hornacek is the Coach of the Year to me.
Well, if the Phoenix Suns make it into the playoffs, yes, he could be.
And I understand that argument, but this was supposed to be the second worst team in the league. I mean, this was the team that was supposed to be tanking with the Sixers. It was the competitive. They were competing for the 1 pick. I mean, right now they are a half a game out behind Memphis.
They've won 4 of their last 5 after getting Eric Bledsoe back.
Getting healthy at the right time. Nobody thought that team was going to be any semblance of anything.
So you think Hornacek's a lock, period?
I mean, I would give him a nod over Doc, maybe. Doc had more talent. Del Negro, do I think Doc is a better coach than Del Negro? Absolutely. Do I think they're going to go further with Doc than they ever did with Del Negro? Absolutely. But if you look at the standings from last year they were a 4 seed, I believe. Right now they're a 3 seed.
There is. Right now they're getting 107 points per game, and they're only allowing 7, or only allowing 100, which is a 7-point differential. But I was reading somewhere that when asked what system they were running last year under Del Negro, that the system was give Chris Paul the ball. And now with Doc Rivers, they're running a lot more plays. They're getting a lot more open looks. They're setting a lot more screens.
I read an article that when Doc Rivers came in, he went up to Chris Paul and he flat out told him, "You are a nobody. What you have done in this league is nothing. You have not done anything in this league." And I saw Chris Paul was like, "I like that because I haven't." He laid it out. He pretty much slapped me in the face. Same thing he did with Jordan, and pretty much just said, prove yourself.
I mean, they haven't really won much since this team's been together now for I believe 3 years. They haven't won anything yet. They haven't even been close. I mean, not even a conference final appearance or anything. With the way this team is playing right now, realistically, how far do you think they go?
I think that there's a really good chance that they go all the way. I'm all in on this team. Right now you have Redick and Crawford and Collison all returning back to practice. They're going to be completely and 100% healthy for a playoff push. Clippers office is all in on this team by adding Turkoglu, Granger, and Davis. I cannot think of a team with a better coach and a better lineup and that is playing as well as the Clippers are playing right now. I favor them at least making it to the conference.
And you mentioned a thing by adding the veteran pickups. I kind of like that because adding veterans that just want to win in general just brings team morale up, even if they're maybe not going to play much. But, if they're veteran players, they know they have to win soon or they don't get one.
Well, the players are all in. The front office is all in.
Yeah.
I mean, what more do you need? The coach is all in.
We haven't brought up one key player of this piece, Jamal Crawford.
Oh.
Well,
how good is Jamal Crawford?
He's just coming back from injury.
Yeah, but how big is that going to be for the stretch time?
6 man. I mean, that's huge.
I mean, he's been one of the best. He's been one of, if not the best, 6-man in the past probably 2 or 3 years.
His ball handling skills just amaze me.
And he has a knack for big shots.
Yeah.
He's getting older, and he's just getting better as he's getting older, which is amazing.
Yeah. So you have them. You think they're a legitimate threat to go out of the West. Justin, what about you? How far do you think they're going?
I think the Thunder or the Spurs will go farther. But I think that only because the Spurs have the same mentality. It's like, how many years do they have that team together anymore? So I think the Spurs are going to make another big run at it just because their time's more limited than the Clippers, I think.
The Spurs smell blood in the water. They're healthy.
Yeah.
And no one, once again, amazingly, you'd think people would finally get onto it. No one is talking about the San Antonio Spurs, who quietly right now have the best record in the NBA.
No one talks about it. It's
have
crazy.
the highest point differential in the NBA right now. There are two teams with a 7-point differential. Spurs, who are 7.6. So they're kind of pushing that 8 margin, which no one else is even close. The Clippers are second.
I think that would be a crazy game to see. That would be very emotional game.
Fun series?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
In general, I think that's going to be emotional if they play.
I would love to see a Clippers-Spurs Western Conference Finals, but at the same time, are we going to write off Kevin Durant? Do we really think he has no chance at this again?
No, I think he has. I think it's between those 3 teams.
I mean, in the West, I agree. Houston's definitely getting better. They're making a lot of strides. They need one more year. They need a little bit more,
Add one more
like
player,
Beverly.
one more
I
scorer.
like Jeremy Lin, but I would like to see a little bit better point guard play there.
I like Patterson a lot too. He's been helping them out a lot.
So Houston right now, they're in 4th. They're 6 games back of San Antonio. They have a 1.5 game lead on Portland for 5. Portland
So those are pretty much all the lock seeds. Your 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then the rest of the Western Conference right now. I mean, that's just a crapshoot, and it's a fun, exciting thing to watch. I think watching who gets at 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th seed.
I agree. It's going to be a fun playoffs in the West. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Just so many great teams out there. How far do I think the Clippers can go? I think at most they're a Western Conference Finals team. If they get hot, anything can happen. Chris Paul, unquestionably the best point guard in the league. I would really like to see someone try and argue that at this point.
Unquestionably? I think we should talk about this next episode.
We can talk about
because I've been thinking about this a lot. Who's the best point guard in the league? And I think that it's up for debate. So next episode...
Are we going to be saying for this year or career-wise?
No, this year, right now.
I'm
This
saying
year,
right
right
now,
now.
I'm still
Okay.
taking Chris Paul. But
Okay.
we can get into that next week. We'll
Next.
give it a little preview. The great point guard debate coming next
Well,
week.
we know who you've got.
It's Chris Paul.
Okay.
I don't want to hear otherwise. Tim, you can lose this argument next week. We can get back at that.
All right.
Yeah, I only see them as a Western Conference Finals team. I'm done picking against San Antonio.
Okay.
They're finally healthy at the right time. There's just how just much it seethes in anger that they lost the finals the way they did last
That game
year.
6 might go down as one of the greatest.
Oh,
I think it's the greatest game I've ever seen in my life. Granted, I was 8 during the Jordan years, so I can't really. I was a lot younger for that, and I've seen for all the great games I've seen over the years, I've just never seen anything like that.
I feel
I've
like
never
it
seen-
had so many great narratives. The fans leaving, the great comeback. Them almost getting it in
The
overtime.
ropes were out. The championship ropes were out, and then Ray Allen hits that shot and goes, "Put that rope away." Blank.
Well, there were a few things that had to happen, but all the lucky bounces that had to happen for that to, the probability of that. I can't remember what it was, but it was something like 1 in 1,000. For the Heat to come back by 5 in
and
30
of course,
seconds.
there's a coaching scrutiny because Tim Duncan not on the floor.
yeah.
Yep.
A lot of people
Well,
don't think
then-
Bosch rips down that board if Tim Duncan's on the floor.
That kind of brings up a good question. Now that the Pacers are struggling, do you think the Heat are just going to walk all the way and not have to worry too much? Because the Pacers seem to be having some troubles right now.
The Pacers absolutely do. The thing is, they still lead the Heat by a 3-game advantage right now.
Okay.
There's something off with their chemistry. They added Evan Turner. He hasn't been really huge off the bench. One thing that I do think that people are forgetting about is, for one, that every team goes through a slump somewhere in the season. You obviously want that slump to happen during the middle and not towards the end.
Yeah.
CJ Watson's been out with with an injury to his elbow.
Okay.
And their backup point guard, that's huge.
Well, and Bynum just got ruled out for the season.
Yeah, I
believe.
think the quote was when he went to the doctor, he said he hadn't seen that much fluid come out of his knee since after the finals back in 2010, the year the Lakers beat the Celtics.
I'm so happy about it. I want him to stop playing basketball. I no longer want this guy to get paid for dribbling a ball. It just irritates me.
I mean, I'm a Sixers fan.
Yeah,
I don't need to go on the Bynum
You
rant.
don't have to get us started, please don't. Back to the Pacers. I was after the Knicks game, I was reading and I saw a quote that Paul George said. He said the Knicks switch almost everything on the floor. They just take it out. They take stuff out. Pretty much what he's saying is their team IQ isn't high enough for them to play competitively. He was saying that they can't, when the Knicks were changing things on them, they couldn't figure it out.
See, I don't know how much I buy into that. I think it's just right now they've had some lineup changes. The chemistry's a bit off. Paul George hasn't been playing as well
He played
since the
terrible in the
All-Star
Knicks
break.
game.
He has been shooting. His shooting is down to 41%. His defensive rating is down since the All-Star break. As anybody that's been watching the Pacers can tell, all of a sudden Paul George is bricking shots.
Yep.
I mean, when he's missing them, it's not like they're bouncing off the rim. They're like a foot to the right or to the left of the rim.
Maybe he's being bothered by something.
He might be. I mean, his rhythm's off right now. And then also when you look at their bench play, I noticed at the beginning of the season when they were on that 16-1 run, that their offense, when the bench was on, was going through Luis Scola.
Mm-hmm.
And when you watch it right now, Luis Scola is not getting the touches that he used to. He's not picking and popping that he deserves. And I don't know why that is.
Well, that's when you bring in an Evan Turner, who is kind of a confidence guy who is known to take a lot of shots. You throw that chemistry off. When they made that deal with the Sixers, the big thing for the Pacers was, how is Evan Turner going to fit in, because he's not the best defensive player, which is obviously what that team is.
He's not a team guy so much. He needs the ball in his hand in order to be effective.
Right. And that, needless to say, that is taking those touches away from Scola. What just scares me about the Pacers right now is, they are very lucky that Miami seems to be slumping too right now. So they haven't lost the home court. Right. If Indiana's going to come out of the East, they have to have home court.
Well, the other thing I was kind of just bringing it back for a second, you were saying Evan Turner needs the ball. Well, I saw a quote where David West pretty much was saying that they're selfish. So that almost confirms it right there, pretty much saying that they're not passing the ball around. They're not playing as a team.
And Larry Bird had some comments for his team earlier in the week during that 5-game losing streak. They ended up winning that night. I believe it was against the Sixers where they got the win, which, everybody is beating the Sixers right now.
Exactly.
So
a win's a win.
A win is a win. I do agree with that, but I'm scared to use this word a little bit, but they seem complacent almost. Mm-hmm. I don't know. The Pacers haven't won anything either. That's the thing. I know people are billing them to be the top team, but it's not like Miami where you can be like, oh, well, who cares about the regular season struggles? Because Miami's won back-to-back titles. Indiana hasn't won anything. I don't care how much you push Miami. Nobody remembers people who push Miami. I do think they need home court if they're going to win. I mean, I know last year with the Indiana series or with the Miami series, Game 7, obviously in Miami, I think that's a huge, that home court crowd just gets, they go all in when they play the Heat. Mm-hmm. That's as hostile of an environment as you're going to play in the NBA is when they're playing the Heat. So I think it is big that they have that 3-game lead. It's actually, in their last 10, they're 5-5. The Heat are 4-6. So they've actually, believe it or not, through all their struggles, have gained a game on the Heat. The East kind of been down this year. A lot of teams, Toronto's playing well. Chicago's playing well. I don't think anybody really looks at them to be a threat to beat Indiana. No. But it does bring up the intriguing point with how well Brooklyn has played.
Oh, they're the best team in the East right now.
Do you think Brooklyn has a chance to knock off Indiana? If in a second-round series, I could see that right now.
I could see him knocking off the Heat more likely.
I agree with that, too, because I think if there's anybody that knows how to beat the Heat, it's Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
And I think they play very similar in style to Indiana. I don't think either of them, as great as Paul George is, as great as Paul Pierce can be when his shot's on, as great as D. Will can be, are they going to have, they don't have that sure power, guy that's going to light up the numbers the way LeBron is, but they play great team ball. I think a Brooklyn-Indiana series would just come down to which of those guys is going to step up and be the guy. Is Paul George going to step up and be that transcendent superstar in that series? Mm-hmm. Is Darren Williams or maybe Joe Johnson a guy, if he gets hot, where he's lights out in clutch time?
How much does age play a factor?
If you look at the Spurs, it doesn't play too much of it.
Greg Popovich also is really good at resting his guys prior to playoff. And as far as I can tell, Jason Kidd is not really resting anybody.
Yeah. They're clicking, though. Mm-hmm. I think that's the thing. They haven't needed to rest anybody because they've all year their struggle has been, or especially at the beginning of the season, was to try to find that chemistry. Everybody kind of pronounced them for dead when Brook Lopez left.
But how good is Miles Plumlee been?
He's been huge off the bench. Their bench has been the biggest surprise. I think everybody knew that Karolinko, who has been, he's been battling injuries all year. I think everybody knew Karolinko was going to be huge for them off the bench. I said, one of my good friends is a huge Nets fan. I said to him that Karolinko was the most underrated signing they made because he was phenomenal for Minnesota last year.
It was huge.
And he's just a dependable guy who does everything off the bench. He's the type of guy you want on your team.
He's your Andre Iguodala. He's your David West. He's your glue guy. He's just a guy that does it all.
But they've had just so many. How good has Sean Livingston been this year? Who would have ever seen that coming?
Oh, he's been phenomenal.
Just defensively, the things he can do, using his length and just disrupting the lanes, and he's been huge for them this year.
If only he could shoot a three.
Role. Yeah, I mean, if he could shoot
Right now they're actually playing him at the 2 guards, not even the backup point guard. They're playing him at the 2 and then Joe Johnson at the 3.
They're going with some of these. Jason Kidd, you got to give him credit. He's going with these weird, almost small ball hybrid kind of lineups. And if you look at them on paper, you would think this is insane. There's no reason why this should work against
that
great
2 guard
NBA teams.
lineup is crazy, though. I mean, it's so hard because no matter what side of the court you're on, you can run a pick and pop to Ron Williams and Paul Pierce, or you can take Joe Johnson, Sean Livingston, and play a little bit of a 2-man game.
And come playoff time, the experience is there. This is a veteran team. I think, Paul Pierce tweeted last night, actually, he said, "Look out, NBA, we're coming." So they
So
are,
he's confident.
they don't want to, I don't think this team is worried about rest. They're locked in. I think Kevin Garnett, I think Paul Pierce, I think the people on Brooklyn know that this is a 1 or 2 year window title team. They essentially mortgage their future for this 1 to 2 year title window. I mean, if they're going to win, I think everybody on that team knows the urgency and knows how little time they have left, I guess I should say. So that's going to be an interesting matchup. But I mean, if we're going back to Indy, we talked about the Clippers. How far do you think they're going? How far do you think Indy's going to go?
I think they make it out of the East.
You think they win the East this year?
I do, yeah.
I said that at the beginning of the year, but I'm not.
I do. I think they get it together. I absolutely do. Part of the reason for that is if you look at the Heat, if you look at who's scared of who in the NBA, you look at what teams are conforming to other teams' styles. And now the Heat have gone big directly so that they can compete with the Pacers. And I think that says a lot about the direction that the Eastern Conference is going. If the Heat are willing to change their style to go against the Pacers.
We're talking about the Heat. Obviously, Greg Oden been in the starting lineup. All basketball aside for a second, I'm really happy to see Greg Oden in the starting lineup. Even if it's limited, I know it'll never be what Greg Oden could have been barring injury.
Well, I know he's probably excited just to be in the starting lineup.
It's been a rough ride for him, so I'm very glad to see that he's active. However,
he's been 4 years out of the NBA. I mean, that's as long of amount of time as Congress deems necessary for a president to hold office. That's a long time.
I was going to say that'd be a good thing to look up. We can talk about that next week about what happened in the 5 years that Greg Oden. Because how many iPhones do you think got made in those 5 years?
Oh gosh.
Oh, my buddy went to prison and he actually just recently got out and he was in there for 4.5 years. So and I'm talking to him on the phone, right? And he's like, "Dude, I don't know how to use smartphones. We didn't have smartphones when I went to jail."
Wow.
And that's just a crazy thought. Like, all this has happened in the 4.5 years. He's just looking at this piece of technology. He's like, "Man, I used to have a Razor."
And there's like 7 different iPhones.
Yo, the Razor, oh man. The Razor was the phone.
I miss my Razor.
Back in like 2005, 2006.
The battery life on them, they last for like 3 days.
And then on top of it, it had a camera. What?
Yeah.
Right?
That was a big deal. If you had a color camera back in the day,
Oh my
you were balling.
gosh.
Couldn't do anything with the pictures.
But you were balling.
That's right.
Facebook. What was Facebook like? Facebook was just starting in
MySpace.
2009.
No.
MySpace.
It was around for a long time. That was right about the time when they opened it up for
took
people
off.
that weren't in college anymore. But taking it back to the Heat, because we are here to talk about basketball.
Sorry.
We are? Wait, NBA podcast?
Not iPhones. Let me ask you guys a question. Do you think that Greg Oden could be a legitimate role player for this team, or does his health history still make you think otherwise?
I mean, the fact of the matter is when he's on the floor, he still picks up fouls at an alarming rate. I like Greg Oden. I want Greg Oden to do well. I think he can give the Heat some quality minutes, but the Heat won 2 titles with small ball.
They did. Although Shane Battier isn't playing as well. Dwayne Wade is obviously more banged up than he has been.
And I agree with Wade, but Battier, remember last year, Battier was playing he was kind of putting up the same numbers.
I know,
as
and then
this
all of a
year.
sudden he
And
just
then
hits
come
like
playoff
12
time,
threes.
Battier's going to deliver.
Yeah,
So
it
I'm
made me
not
so
too
mad.
worried about that. I'm more concerned with the fact that since we had our MVP argument and I passionately defended LeBron James and said he's unquestionably the MVP, that he's just decided to forget how to shoot. And it's just making me look like an idiot out here.
Well, thank you.
We can edit that.
No, I
Keep
think
the
that's
idiot
definitely
out.
going on the SoundCloud for our highlights. By the way, if you're listening to this podcast, we put all of our highlights from the show on SoundCloud, so look that up. But the thing is, the Miami Heat's main weakness has been their rebounding, which is what he does. It's what Greg Oden does.
Yeah. I'm worried about the team, though, is if they get 4 or 5, maybe 6, 7 games with him, and they get too used to him, and then he gets injured again, which I really hope it doesn't for his sake. But then if the Heat get too used to playing that, and he's the guy that's getting the rebounds, then that could spell trouble in the future if he gets injured.
Well, I don't think he can go into any playoff run thinking, oh man, what if this guy gets injured? I mean, the fact is, though, is that as well as he has been playing, he's only been playing about 12 or 13 minutes a game, even in the starting lineup. He's been playing the first half of the first quarter and the first half of the third quarters. The Heat are a -4 with him on the court. Off the court, though, they're when he's off the court, they're a +7.
I just think he slows them down. The Heat, it's been so based off athleticism. They've never had a true big man. It was always Bosch and Anderson.
Well, their offensive rating falls dramatically when he's on the floor, but their defensive rating goes up.
I don't think they have a proven method to beat Indy. When the Heat have played Indy, it's almost become a known fact that Roy Hibbert is going to go nuts and just absolutely torch them. But they've still won those games. I think you have to let Hibbert. To me, if the Heat are going to beat Indy, it's not about stopping Hibbert. Hibbert is going to just do his thing, and he's going to dominate you on the boards, and him and David West are going to score a ton of points in the interior.
But how close were those games? You can't say that they dominated. And if you look at the record this season, it's a split record. I do not agree that they're just going to win because they won last year. A few lucky bounces in either team's direction was what made the difference on that series.
I agree, but I'm saying the biggest factor for the Heat, for me, if they're going to stop Indy, is they got to slow down Paul George and Stevenson. And we've talked about Paul George's struggles. We mentioned that a little bit. I think if you slow down Paul George, Hibbert and Weston go as nuts as they want. I don't think they're going to win you. I don't think they're going to win you a 7-game series.
I actually disagree. I think if you slow down Stevenson, if you look, Stevenson leads the Pacers in assists and rebounds. He is, he's a glue guy. He's the guy that does everything. But part of the reason why the Miami Heat can go to this big lineup is because of how well Chris Bosh has been shooting. Right now he's shooting 38% from 3, which for a good three-point shooter is a decent season, but for Chris Bosh, that's an excellent season.
Yeah, Chris Bosh's range has been such a just underrated part of his game. He's really evolved that kind of since coming to Miami, and a lot of people have kind of always mentioned him as the third wheel of that conversation, but Chris Bosh to me has always been the second most important player on that team. The way he spaces the floor for them, and the fact that you have to respect his jumper. If you put a slower, for example, when they played the Thunder, if you have Perkins or Ibaka on him, guys who aren't as fast on the wing, and then he can kind of make those moves and get to the inside and just be so much faster and so much quicker off the dribble. I mean, you have to respect that, and I think it's still to this day, Chris Bosh is the most underrated part of that Miami Heat team. He's been absolutely pivotal for them.
So I do have to give Eric Spoelstra some credit, though, and I think a lot of the reason why they moved Greg Oden into the starting lineup is that right now, if the season were to end, Miami would face the Bobcats, who have a dominating center in Al Jefferson. They would then go on to play Toronto, who has Valanciunas, and then they would play the Pacers, who have Roy Hibbert. And how much do you guys think that playoff schedule has factored them starting Greg Oden?
Well, if you're talking about Charlotte, weird stats aside, I'm going to say this first because this isn't actually the reason I think it doesn't matter, but LeBron always just seems to dominate Charlotte. Kind of a weird thing like that. Yeah. But that's not important to me. Al Jefferson is great this year. He has just been awesome. There's no doubt about that. Still not the best defensive center, though. He doesn't give you kind of what Jonas and Roy Hibbert do, per se, on the defensive end. I think he's more of an offensive oriented guy. I do respect the Bobcats' team defense. Don't get me wrong; it's very, very underrated.
Oh, it's so good.
But I don't think Miami even view Charlotte as a speck on their radar. I think there's not a doubt, and that would be maybe the biggest upset in basketball history if Charlotte beats Miami.
That would be awesome.
So Valanciunas, though, they'd be playing, against Toronto in the next round if the season ended right now, and then you'd want Greg Oden to go against Valanciunas, obviously.
Yeah, but Toronto, the only other thing that I have against Toronto is as good of a story they've been this year, and as good as DeRozan and Jonas and that young team has been, especially post Rudy Gay trade, which we talked a little bit last week. I just don't. They've never been to the playoffs together as a team. They're going to play Washington right now if it ended today. I think that's going to be difficult. Both of those. That's kind of an interesting series because they're both those young and maybe upcoming teams per se.
That's my favorite series in the Eastern Conference right now. If it were to happen, that's the one I want to. That's in the first round. That's the one I want to see the most.
I agree with you there, but if we're talking Chicago, Brooklyn.
Oh, that
rematch
could be a lot of
last
fun.
year.
Yeah,
that's going to be a bloodbath, dude. Joakim Noah, is going to be.
I watched Chicago play the other day, and I watched a bunch of their games. And Justin, maybe you can agree with me on this one, or maybe you'll disagree.
Okay,
I don't know. Chicago, because they're such a good defensive team and they can't score any points, I just don't find them that much fun to watch.
They're not.
I love watching it more for Joakim Noah's overall. I don't even know what to call it. Just overall mentality. He's so enthusiastic.
There's no reason the Chicago Bulls should be good this year, and he is so good, and he's just keep willing them to victory after victory after victory. The Deng trade didn't slow them down.
Right.
Derrick Rose. I mean, obviously they're not going to be. I don't think they're title contending teams this year.
I think they can make the second round.
Oh yeah, so do I. And I think you just have to respect Joakim Noah. He plays the game with so much heart and passion.
He needs
and that's
someone else to help him. Like,
yeah. I mean, if Melo goes there next year, which I think is going to happen,
I would love that.
Hey, speaking of the Knicks.
Well, Phil Jackson officially sworn in as the Knicks president. There's a whole big press conference with him and owner James Dolan. Who
and speaking of the press conference,
ever comes out. I know we both watched the press conference. I thought it was very interesting. It was kind of funny. Phil being Phil, coming. I have no prepared remarks, and I'm just going to keep talking. I liked it. What did you think? I thought I liked that. For Phil seems to have a grip that the Knicks right now don't. It's just dysfunction at its finest. And Phil is like, the Knicks need to get back to building a team right now. And over the past few years, the Knicks have never seemed to do that. They just kind of make big signings and try to just fill it together with whoever they can get. Phil wants to kind of do that organic, build it from the ground up. It starts somewhere. I don't know. What did you think? What did you take away from the press conference?
The biggest takeaway I took was Dolan's quote, he willingly and gratefully concedes power to Phil Jackson.
And that should be, if you're a Knicks fan, you should be
exciting.
Screaming from the mountaintops in excitement that he's given up power. That's Christmas for Knicks fans, or it should be.
I think he's excited that he doesn't have to be as involved now. Like, I think it lifts a lot off of him, and that he put on himself pretty much.
Yeah, well, exactly. He put it on himself. That's what happens when you say dumb things like the current Knicks team is a finals or bust team, which no 29-40 team is a finals or bust team. I'm sorry.
Well, no matter. I think that just him being with the franchise obviously gives it a ton of credibility. And since Phil Jackson has come on board, the Knicks have actually won 8 straight games. How much of a renewed interest do you think the players have now that they know that Phil Jackson is the president of the Knicks and that they want to play for him next year? They want to play under Phil Jackson.
And he's a winner.
They're like trying to prove to him that they're worth keeping. I think that's exactly what's going on right now.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about, Phil basically hinted at an entire overhaul of the team. They're for them, in their case now, they're trying to battle for that last playoff spot. I think trying to just get some respectability. Atlanta's kind of, playing a little bit better as of late. They were just down for a while with all the injuries. It's another team we talked about a little bit last week.
Well, right now they're only, 3.5 games back from Atlanta?
They are 3 flat right now.
Well, then I think it goes worth mentioning that they beat Indiana. I think that was a pretty cool mark for them to do that. I think that proves a lot to their team in general, that they might believe that they can beat the Pacers now.
Hey, speaking of that, I mean, how happy do you think that the Heat will be if their first round matchup ends up being against the Bobcats, and then the Pacers, who have the number 1 seed, end up having to play the Knicks, who are on a roll right now?
And the Knicks just somehow get through it.
I don't think they'll get through it, but they're going to take, they're going to take them to 6 or 7 games and no title.
It'll
no
be tough.
title.
At the end of the day, Carmelo Anthony is still a superstar in the league, and Carmelo Anthony alone can win you 1 or 2 games. Yeah. Is there anybody on Charlotte as great as Al Jefferson's been this year? And, we can't talk about that enough. He really has been one of the most underrated players in the league this year. But is Al Jefferson really going to win you 2 games by himself? I don't think so. Melo can do that. We've seen Melo have those 62-point games where he just goes off, and when his stroke is on, you can't deny it.
You can't stop him.
The interesting question for me now is, we've seen Carmelo praise the Phil hire. He called it a power move. He said that he really would potentially alter his game to play for Phil. But another source is going around saying that Melo is still out the door because he recognizes that under Phil, it's going to take probably a year or 2 of totally reworking this roster before they even get to that kind of building stage where they can really start to make the push to truly contend. Right. And so they're saying he doesn't want to lose those 2 years of his prime, and potentially when the Knicks are those contending teams, he's out of his prime. It isn't the elite player he is now. Do you think what do you think? I think Melo is gone anyway. I think all along he's going to Chicago for that reason. I don't think Melo wants to lose his prime, and especially now that LeBron and Wade and Bosh and all these other big superstars that are his age and have been around as long as him have won titles. I think Melo is gonna, as much as he would like to stay, I think if this hire happens last year, it's a little bit different. But right now, I still think Melo's out the door.
I like the comment that Phil Jackson said about Carmelo, saying that he thinks Carmelo's a great player, but he thinks that Carmelo could take it to a whole nother level. And I think if you're Carmelo, you got to be interested in what he meant by that, possibly. Like maybe Phil Jackson knows something or thinks he could teach him something that's going to make him just next year, if he's there, just be like through the roof, crazy stats, career highs, everything. So I think Carmelo's still going to look at it and see what maybe Phil Jackson has to offer him.
He did get a big nod from Phil Jackson. I think regardless of what happens, that people's expectations, they need to know that this is not going to be a quick fix.
Yeah.
The biggest challenge for the Knicks right now is rebuilding the roster. I would just like to say that Bargnani, the Knicks are paying him $11.5 million. Why?
Well, that trade when it happened, I think everybody was just mind blown.
Why would you ever pay Bargnani 11.5? That doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense.
The Raptors were literally giving Bargnani away. They're saying, we will pay you to take him off our hands. And the Knicks gave up a first-round pick for him.
It's crazy. And paying 11. Also, Sotomayor's making $23 million. Chandler's making $13 million. I mean, that is a lot of money on the books with a whole bunch of out-of-their-prime players.
And personally, and I don't know how much he's making, but I think if you're the Knicks, you want to get rid of Felton as quickly as possible.
No one will take
going
him
to jail.
Yeah, well, there you
may
go.
not have that issue.
Yeah.
I mean, Amari, for better or for worse, he's been playing a little bit better as of late. We're finally seeing some semblance,
but not a $23 million a year player. No matter how well he's been playing.
Amari, unfortunately, because you used your amnesty on Billups and not Amari Stoudemire, you just have to bite the bullet. There's nothing you can do there. You just have to wait until the money comes off the books. Nobody's going to take Amari Stoudemire's contract at this point unless you pay a significant portion of that money. Mm-hmm. So they're either going to have to pay him to go away, or they're going to say, you know what, you're a veteran guy. You could still give us something.
Yeah.
At least, just finish out your contract, see what you do. It's kind of the same with Tyson Chandler a little bit. He's been down this year big time. I mean, I know he's been battling some injuries.
He was down last year also.
Yeah, it's just kind of, he had that run kind of starting, from about probably like 2009. I'll give him a little credit even before that. And then, obviously I thought he was the biggest piece that had allowed the Mavericks to win that title in 2011. As great as Dirk was, Tyson Chandler was that X factor, I think.
Yeah.
He was great for his first few years in New York, but again, he's getting up there with age. It's crazy to think that he's been in the league since 2002.
Has he really?
Yeah, he was 2001, excuse me. He got drafted. He was the second overall pick, the Kwame Brown year.
Wow.
Chicago took him out of high school, and he was still young and never really developed under the Bulls, and he got bounced all over the place. I remember he was at Charlotte, New Orleans for a little bit, and then it just kind of all started to click with Dallas. I mean, I don't think anybody, if you talk to NBA fans back in 2003, 2004, and you said Tyson Chandler would be a center on the Olympic team, I think people would have thought you were nuts.
That, or they would have been like, who's that?
Hey, a number 2 pick that worked out. I mean, it's a whole lot better than Derek Williams or Michael Beasley, huh?
That's very true. Though Beasley is giving the Heat some quality minutes this year. Obviously, you're a Suns fan, so a little jaded in that aspect.
No, I mean, last year, and I know you just said this year, but last year, Michael Beasley was the only player in the league that had more shots than points. And that's not a good record to have.
No,
that's
what do you mean?
You don't want to be that player.
Hey, he's setting a record.
Man, it really grinded my gears that Michael Beasley
had
that many shots. But speaking of grind my gears, what do we have this week, Kevin?
Well, I'm going to talk about a topic that is, I think, near and dear to everyone's heart that you can relate to. And that is when you go in the bathroom, I do not want to have a conversation with you while I'm occupied. So with that, let's get into it. Grind my gears. I don't want to talk to you while we're in the bathroom.
Okay.
What grinds my gears?
All right, so this week on What Grinds My Gears, we're going to talk about something that I think everybody can relate to, and it's more of a bathroom etiquette kind of thing. Now, I noticed the other day when, I'm going to my job, I'm here at work, I'm going into the bathroom. I think we all kind of look at the bathroom as some kind of place. It's like a sanctuary almost. You can do your reading, you can check your phone, check the Twitterverse that we love to talk about so much. But I've noticed that the other day, you always get those people that you'll be in the stall or you'll be at the urinal or whatever, and you get that person that comes up to you and starts having a conversation. I mean, I know when I'm in the bathroom, it's a place of a sanctuary. It's a place of peace. Some people meditate. It's your throne. It's your palace. It's the one place where the rest of the world just isn't a big deal. You can just go in there, and you always get a person coming to the bathroom. I have never once wanted to have a conversation while wiping my rear end. Not once, not twice, not ever. It's awkward. No one wants to hear it. And what if you're like making bodily function noises? It's just weird. Whatever you do, you go into the bathroom, end the conversation. We could be mid-conversation, walking all the way up to the door. door. As soon as we get in the bathroom, I don't want to hear from you anymore. I want to go in, I want to handle my business, wash my hands, and get out the door, and then we can pick right up where we left off. No one wants to be disturbed in the bathroom, people. Do it for America. Stop having conversations in the bathroom.
Thanks for that, Kevin. We do not like you talking to us while we are on the bathroom. Wouldn't you agree, Tim?
I absolutely think that while my hand is occupied, I don't need anyone having conversation with me.
Exactly. Exactly. So we got to get into some notes, right?
Yeah.
All right, let's see what we got here. We got Jeff Green has scored 25 points or more 12 times this season. He has also scored in single digits a dozen times this season. Nobody else has that many 25-point games and scored so many single-digit games also.
That's up there with the Beasley record, I think. That's just amazing.
Well, I mean, it's not quite up there with the Beasley, but I was so high on Jeff Green coming in, and I am a little bit disappointed that I have him on my fantasy team, and I was a bit disappointed because of that.
Yeah, I can understand that.
Been a little bit disappointing.
All right, moving on. DJ White signed a 10-day contract with the Charlotte Bobcats Friday. Do you think that's a good move, bad move, and just nothing there?
Nope.
Okay, Steve Nash, he's back.
He's back.
Yeah, he played in the Lakers game against the Wizards. He had 5 points and 11 assists. He said after the game, it was probably pretty stupid for me to play tonight, but I just wanted to play.
Yeah, it was great to see him in the court, especially after that Grantland documentary that he's been putting out and the interviews and everything. I was just so happy to see him playing again.
His filter is totally gone with the I'm just doing it for the paycheck line, and now I probably shouldn't have been playing, but I'm doing it anyway because I want to. Steve Nash is getting funny as he's getting up there.
He's getting older, and from what I can tell, once you're older, you don't care as much. You just make fun of yourself, I guess.
He's a legend. He can do what he wants.
All right. Well, when asked if President Obama would make the current roster in the LA Lakers, Kobe said yes, he could, actually.
I mean, how much of that is a testament to what Kobe thinks of the current roster on the Lakers?
I don't think it's saying anything good.
No.
Not at all. Well, actually, and I think I put that in my news earlier this segment, that they only have one active point guard.
That's right, Kendall Marshall.
Yep.
So,
who was on the Sixers D-League team this year. Let me just say that. He was on the Sixers D-League team this year, and he's now starting point guard.
He was
for
the number
Lakers.
14 pick 2 or 3 years ago.
talk
with the
about
Suns.
opportunity.
Yeah.
You better not mess this one up.
That coming.
Don't get injured either, because that's going to be a whole nother problem.
Nick Young might be my favorite player in the NBA.
Nick Young's awesome. I was sad we got rid of him from the Sixers.
I mean, I'm not sad that we got rid of him, but he's just so entertaining.
Yeah.
Hey, speaking of the Lakers, let me ask you guys a question. Who do you think is a worse basketball player, Robert Sacre or Chris Humphries?
See,
Sacre.
I hate Chris Humphries.
Chris Humphries grabs boards, though.
He does.
Oh, man. Did you see that replay of him almost shooting at the wrong basket a couple weeks ago?
I did not. I will have to look at that.
If we're going to talk about bad plays, what about Michael Carter-Williams, where he jumped to shoot it and then just didn't shoot it and threw the ball to the stands? So.
That's just pure frustration. And I will say, if we're going to stay with the Sixers, Brandon Davies took a 3. I believe it was the second game against Indy, and it was quite possibly the worst basketball shot I've ever seen in my life. I guarantee you that any of us could pick up a basketball, get the look that Brandon Davies got, and we would put up a better shot than that. It didn't even get close. I'm not even going to call it an air ball because it didn't even hit the bottom of the net. It went up and went down.
Now, was it? Oh, I saw that. Wasn't this a guy that they signed like a couple weeks ago?
No, Brandon Davies has actually been on. He's been on the team the whole year. He's been. I know he had a finger injury or something like that. He's been like the 12th man the whole year. They've been
12th man, huh?
Yeah,
that's pretty respectable.
Yeah.
Right.
Is it on the Sixers right now?
It might not be. I don't know. All right, Steph Curry's brother signed a 10-day contract with the Cleveland Cavaliers. He spent most of his season in the D-League.
I mean, they ain't point guard depth. It can't hurt. I mean, what do they have to lose at this point?
It's gotta suck having Steph Curry as your brother. There's so much.
I mean, there's other things that would bother me more than having a really rich brother.
Well, yeah, I guess fair enough with that. All right, Derrick Rose and the Bulls are all in on Rose participating in the USA team during the summer.
I think that Derrick Rose is another Brandon Roy. and his career's over. And I don't think it's a good move.
I don't want to quite bury Derrick Rose yet. And the reason I'm not going to bury Derrick Rose is because the meniscus tear this year is in a different knee than the surgically repaired ACL.
Both his knees are messed up. That's even better.
But a meniscus tear, I don't think that's as serious as the ACL is. We've seen Westbrook's come back from the meniscus tear, and he's been pretty. He's been pretty looking much the same. I do think Derrick Rose is going to have to make adjustments to his game. I think he probably knows that at this point. But I'm not going to bury Derrick Rose yet. Come on.
Hey, speaking of
Russell Westbrook, the whole ACL problems. Well, he left in Toronto's game in the third quarter after bumping knees with Kyle Lowry. Me and Tim were watching the footage, and it didn't look good.
No, did you see this knee bump that he took last night?
I did not see the knee bump. I only caught the end of that game.
It was gnarly. And then he hit his hand on the floor. He went out.
He looked angry.
And also in that game, KD scored 51 points. That's his second 51-point game this season, and he's also the first NBA player to score 50 or more points with 12 rebounds, 7 assists, and 7 threes.
Oh, and most importantly, hit the game winner.
Yep, sure
At
did.
the end of the day, KD has been just lethal.
So can we settle this MVP argument and just admit that Tim was right?
Right now, it's Kevin Durant. I'm not admitting right. So we still have some basketball left, but right now, it's Kevin Durant right now.
Okay. Well, last in our little news segment here, Parker said he was uncertain about going to the NBA. He said his college career isn't complete.
He's going pro.
I think it depends on how much your draft stock drops, right?
I think NBA executives and NBA scouts don't base it as much as one game as we are.
I kind of disagree with that because when you look at Derrick Williams, he was not the number 2 pick, and then he had that huge game against Duke where he single-handedly beat Duke, and his draft stock rose to the number 2 pick, and I think they probably look at that and say, look, this number 1 pick couldn't even carry a team against a much worse team.
But do we let one game just rule out an entire season? Jabari Parker has been, Dick Vitale tweeted, I know, for example, that he thought Jabari Parker easily should be the 1 pick in the NBA draft.
I hear you. Well, so that's it for notes, huh?
Yeah, that's all the notes we've got.
We just want to remind people, please, if you're on Twitter, #DADpod. If you have something that we should talk about, we absolutely will talk about it.
And if you really like us, you can follow us on Twitter. You can follow me, Kevin, at Refuse to Lose, RAFUSETOLOSE. You can follow Tim at Tim from Tucson. That's Tucson as in Tucson, Arizona. So remember the
TUCSON, Tucson.
Yep, there we go. You can follow Justin at J Cousart, JCOUSART.
Yes.
You can tweet us any ideas, any thoughts you have. We will respond to you. We are real people.
We are real.
Hey, actually, before we cut this out and go into fantasy, let's do a really short segment because this episode is getting so long. A listener actually did use that hashtag DADpod. This came from at Nefaris Nick. And his idea is cutting the season from 82 games to 58 games, cutting out the preseason together and starting it out with a tournament-style play similar to what they're doing essentially.
March Madness.
March Madness. And then I was thinking Summer League, what they've done to the Summer League. This reminds me a lot. In his
little article, he compared it a lot to soccer as well, which I'm cool with it. I like the idea. Preseason, not many people pay attention anyway, so I'm fine with that.
I think preseason should be shorter anyhow.
What I didn't like was that every team, I don't know how he figured it out. But he pretty much said every team would lose 4 home games, which scares me a little bit.
It does scare you. The reason why that scares people is because of the revenue that the owners are getting. That's why they want those home games so much. But his argument is that the extra revenue that a tournament style play would bring to the owners, and then also the added excitement you would have at the very beginning of the season when because as most people know, you don't really start paying attention to basketball until Christmas.
Right. Well, he also said there'd be tons of fantasy opportunities and gambling opportunities that would come out of it, and I'm all for that, and give me something to play.
Sportsbook.eu.
Exactly. So I'm okay with that, and it would give maybe some new rivalries and actual season a tad bit more interesting as well.
Know what I would really like to see?
What?
I would love to see a 4-team kind of 2 play-in games, or maybe like a 3-game series where top 6 in each conference are set, and then you have those teams play for the 7 and 8 seed. So right now, just as a hypothetical, in the East it would be Charlotte versus Cleveland, and it would be Atlanta versus New York, both of which I think could be legitimately competitive series, be entertaining basketball.
I think
in the West, it'd be Dallas versus Minnesota. So, Kevin Love in the mix, going, getting his
Kevin
team
Love
there.
and Dirk Nowitzki, two of the greatest white power forwards in the league.
and Memphis Phoenix. Both of these teams, Memphis coming on strong as of late. Phoenix has been here all year fighting for that last playoff spot. Regardless, everybody talks about the ethics of tanking, and that whole big debate is going on right now. But the fact of the matter is, for as many teams that are supposedly tanking, there are a lot of teams that aren't making the playoffs that are genuinely trying to get that 8 seed. Cleveland, Phoenix, Memphis, Dallas. It's a little different in the West because I think at least for the first three, they all think they can get in and make some noise, and I would say they are good teams. Minnesota's kind of Minnesota's
Minnesota's Minnesota. The interesting thing about Minnesota is that they are the only team that's not in the playoff that has a plus 4 point differential. And they actually have a better record than the 7th and 8th seeds right now in the West. And I think a lot of that is because of that 0-10 stretch that they went on the beginning of the season where they just kept losing close games. And so they're better than their record says that they are.
And if they were in the East, they'd be locked in the 7 right now. And we've talked
I think they should just get rid of conferences altogether, and it should just be the top 16 teams. I mean, how much more exciting would that be? Because you have, the Eastern Conference, which is just terrible every single year, and then you have all these great teams in the West who deserve to be in the playoffs and aren't.
Yeah, but is the East, but you have to think it's going to balance at some point.
Yeah, but what's even the point of doing East versus West? Why not just do the top 16? What about divisions? What about just getting rid of divisions? Because that also seems like kind of a pointless thing to me. No team cares. We won our division. Who cares? I mean, that's the kind of thing you hang up in your locker.
But how much do division winning actually matter?
It doesn't.
Playoff? I mean, how often do you see a division leader be where, because obviously the division winner gets that 3 seed.
Right.
How often are they? I mean, I'm looking at the Eastern Conference standings right now. Toronto would be the 3 seed,
and they're getting it anyway. So what's the point of having a division at all?
Just for travel purposes. It's for scheduling purposes. It makes it easier.
Maybe
you don't
some
want
rivalry purposes as well.
I guess so. There's plenty of rivalries that aren't in the same division, though. I'm trying to think of other examples of rivalries in the same division where it actually matters. And apart from obviously, the New York rivalry, and there's a different reason for that. It has nothing to do with them being in the same division. It's because they're in the same city. There's been this concocted Phoenix Suns and Lakers rivalry. There's no rivalry there.
But it was though
there was at one point, but I don't think that's because they played in the same division.
It's the way it goes.
Why don't we talk about some fantasy players that might deserve to make your lineups?
That's a great idea. Let's go. It is playoff time after all.
Yes.
Now NBA fantasy basketball tips.
All right, so we're now getting into the fantasy basketball segment of the show. It's getting to be that playoff time. I know I'm in my first playoff game right now. Thankfully, I'm getting the W right now. I'm leading 6-3. Justin, how's it going for you?
I'm actually losing by a little bit, but that's because I have my players aren't playing that much this week. Next week, I'll have almost a full lineup almost every time. So.
Well, that's the thing is the Clippers right now, if you own a player that's on the Clippers like I have, Chris Paul, they're only playing 2 games this week.
Yep.
Yeah, that's me too. Yeah, I'm a Chris Paul owner as well. My first overall pick. Got him at 5. Couldn't believe he slipped that far. Really was surprised by that. I was all ready to. I was having the Steph Curry, Kevin Love debate.
I actually think that I picked him up at 3 or 4, but it was a little bit. I picked him up farther down than where he was projected to go as well. The thing about Steph Curry going ahead of Chris Paul is that I've never really agreed with that whatsoever. A lot of people they think of Steph Curry hitting all those threes, but in fantasy, threes are so easy to come by. There's always a plethora of shooting guards on there that get hot and cold throughout the season.
I just got so lucky with my point guards this year. I mean, obviously Chris Paul, you expect to be great, but then, one of the most underrated picks for me was your boy, Goran Dragic, just exceeding the wildest expectations that I could have imagined.
Oh, I killed it I got Dragic and Bledsoe way late, and both of them have just been killing it. But speaking of point guards, if you happen to own Kyrie Irving, he's out for at least 2 weeks. He might be out for the remainder of the season. And if you need to pick up some of that production, I think that you could look at Dion Waiters and Jarrett Jack for increased production with Kyrie being out.
Yeah, that was one person I was going to mention, Jarrett Jack. He's probably worth picking up because he's on the Cavs, so he'll probably see some more minutes. Averaging kind of about 1-3 a game, 3 rebounds, 4 assists. Kind of about a steal and a little less than a block a game.
Right, but how much are those numbers going to go up with Kyrie out? I would assume that he would go that starting role.
And Jarrett Jack, watching him last year play, he's clutch. He can come in clutch a lot of the time. So
Waiters too. I know. There's earlier in the season there was the whole kind of drama with the Kyrie Irving and Dion Waiters couldn't play together. They didn't like each other. Like Dion felt froze out of the offense, and so now Waiters is essentially, I guess, the guy on that team, really, at this point. He's going to be taking a ton of shots.
Yeah.
He's had the tendency to, I know fantasy-wise his big problem is last year is he would take a ton of shots, but it's just his shooting percentage was just awful. I think it was under 40. It was well under 40%.
And you have to expect that to go down with Kyrie being out and with him being such a focal point of opposing teams' defenses.
Another guy, we made mention of early in the show, been often criticized, has a terrible contract, but Amari Stoudemire is providing some spark off the Knicks bench. I know he put up 20 and 10 last night.
He's starting right now.
Right. In the starting lineup, the Knicks hot right now, winners of 8 straight, 8-2 over the last 10. If, there could be some leagues where he's still not owned in.
Absolutely.
If you have the chance to scoop him up, by all means, he can give you some points, give you some
rebounds and a good effective field goal percentage too.
I think someone is worth mentioning is Mike Dunleavy. He's been playing really well recently, and even through his injury, which was crazy, by the way, to see hit that black eye that he got from that was
a lot of blood.
What did we talked about how much we like Joakim Noah? What did Joakim Noah say to him after he got hit with that? He was like, "Oh, it was the first time somebody actually knocked some toughness into Duke or something like that." Throwing a little shade at him a little bit. Oh
man, I just watching him play in general, I think he might be worth looking into, and he's only owned in 34% of ESPN leagues, so he's probably around if you need a shooting guard or a small forward.
Absolutely. And speaking of players we mentioned earlier, and you actually mentioned it in your news, Kendall Marshall is the only healthy player on the Lakers roster. Anybody that was a Kendall Marshall owner earlier in the season knows how valuable he can be with those assists. And right now he's only owned in 60% of leagues. So if you dropped him, somebody else dropped him, now would be a great time to pick him back up because I can definitely see Mike D'Antoni riding Kendall Marshall out for the remainder of the season.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And we know, we mentioned Nash coming back, but can't really depend on Steve Nash to cut into his minutes too much at
especially because he said that he probably shouldn't have played. So
yep. And also the Timberwolves, as I don't know, our listeners know, but me being an avid Timberwolves fan, Nikolai Pekovic is out. The Timberwolves are obviously out of the playoff hunt at this point. There's a really good chance that Peck comes back, but at the same time, what's the point of bringing him back and risking further injury? And Gorgui Dieng, their rookie this year, just posted a 20 and 20 game. And the reason why this is so rad, and he was great in college, but the reason why this is so rad is that he's actually the first rookie in 20 years to post a 20 and 20 game.
53 fantasy points.
Yeah, he's been killing it.
Yeah, that was crazy.
And if Peck stays out, he's also going to get you some blocks. I think that if you need points, rebounds, or blocks, Gorgui Dieng could be a great fantasy option.
Worth looking into.
That pretty much wraps up the whole thing. We know it was a bit longer, and thank you everybody so much for listening. Again, we want to thank at Nefaris Nick for giving us that topic idea. If you have something that you would like to say to us, we keep our tweet deck open all the time, and all you need to do is hashtag DADpod to find us.
Yeah, it's exciting, and we between the three of us, we're pretty much checking it constantly, so it won't go unnoticed.
Absolutely. Well, I would at least say the two of us. I'm not sure if Kevin actually has a tweet deck open with the DAD pod constantly, but I know that you and me are rocking that one.
I'm not a tweet deck user, no, but it doesn't mean I don't check my Twitterverse. Come on.
Actually,
I'm up on my social media game, Tim.
I got you. And anybody that was interested in that topic we did talk about, if you searched hashtag DAD pod, Nick Josh, you put up a great link to that. Again, you can find us on iTunes by searching Drive and Dish. Also, we're on YouTube now, so you can also search Drive and Dish. If you are on iTunes, please leave us a 4 or 5-star review and hit the subscribe button because it helps us drive up the rankings.
Do it. Hit that subscribe button. It's blue.
All right. Hit the blue button, swallow the blue pill. We will see you next week.
And I think instead of just ending it, we're going to end with a little LeBron James rap because we did Kobe's rap last week, so we got to end it on another rap.
Dear Lord.
Let's hope for a rap battle between the two of them.
Well, let's please, for the love of God, let's hope that stops.
We couldn't handle that.
Yo, you already know what it is. It's the kid, King James. I want to give a shout out to the 4 Horsemen. Shout out to Fat 5, Actor 330, Rainbows Mav and the homie Rich. Daytime at the Hazelton. Chillin' thinking of a master plan. By the time not hearing the sun glow, the carrier dropping up another 100.
That's all. That's all.
That's all, folks.
Thank you for listening to the Drive and Dish NBA podcast. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes by searching Drive and Dish. On Twitter, use the hashtag DADpod. You can find Kevin at Refuse to Lose, Justin at Jay Kuzart, and Tim at Tim from Tucson. We would like to thank Cox Media Group for allowing us to use their studio here in Jacksonville. We are in no way affiliated with the NBA, and any sound clips you heard on today's episode are copyright of their respective copyright owners. Go get them. We'll talk to you later. Until next time, toodaloo.